Welcome to Keen on Retirement, a show dedicated to helping you thrive before and during your retirement years. If you are looking to grow and protect your wealth and want to make the second half of your life the best half, then listen in as wealth advisor Bill Keen sorts through the key issues that you need to know in a lively and candid way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Keen on Retirement. I'm your co-host, Steve Sandusky, and with me today, as always, are Bill Keen and Matt Wilson. Gentlemen, how you doing today?
Well, we're doing good, and anytime we get to that part of the season where the leaves start to change here in the Midwest, it's always a nice time. In fact, this month of October, September, October, probably one of my favorite months of the year, Steve.
Yeah, I think it is for a lot of people. And out here on the West Coast, I'm seeing a lot of trees that have changed color here as well. So we're definitely getting some fall color up here in Oregon too.
All right.
Yeah, with the warm temperatures, though, I wonder what it's going to do, if it's going to impact it much.
Yeah, we're going to have to see.
Yeah,
for sure. Matt and I were down in Dallas, Austin and Dallas here about a week and a half ago, maybe a week ago or so. And boy, it was, what was it, Matt? 100 degrees when we got off the plane?
Well, it's been 100, high 80s, low 90s here, Kansas City in October.
Oh, yeah. Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
fall weather will come one of these days.
It will. That's right. Yeah. And so will the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, right?
Oh yeah.
We don't want to jinx ourselves here.
Okay. All right. We'll leave the Chiefs out of this for today then. All right. A lot of good things to chat about here today. I think first we're going to tap into an article, Matt, I think you saw this, about the salary needed to afford America's 50 biggest cities. So we want to just touch on that for a moment. But I think the main thing that we're going to chat about here today is a article that was sent, I think, to one of you guys from a client that had a rather, let's call it a disturbing headline about retirement. So I'll just tease you all with that. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. But yeah, let's talk about this salary needed to afford America's 50 biggest cities. Obviously, cost of living is an issue that's been in the public conversation here for some time. Housing affordability, of course, is an issue. Inflation is a concern. So I think a timely article here. So Matt, what would we see in this article?
Yeah. This was on gobankingrates.com. And, the headline was about the salary needed to afford to live in America's 50 biggest cities. And, it started off about, you should probably make sure your salary is growing fast enough so you could live in, the city, I guess, that you're living in, which, off topic a little bit, but it's like, well, what do you do to make sure your salary is growing fast enough? I guess, there's a lot that goes into that than just determining if it is or not. But what they did, Go Banking Rates did some research analyzing the data from the U.S. Census, Zillow, Best Places, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics to determine the salary you'll need to live comfortably, and what they defined it as, because that's always the most important thing. It's like, well, who's determining this? Just because it's all, it's subjective, right? I mean, everyone's version of comfort is different. So what they did is they defined it as they applied the 50-30-20 rule, which states that needs should not exceed 50% of a person's income. And they look at needs as, well, housing costs and things like that, what it would be to buy groceries, your basic, transportation. Healthcare. And that's how they determine it. And any guess to what the number one, well, they ranked it, I guess, the 8 cities we need the highest salaries, 6 are located in California, but they have it ranked 1 through 50. And can you guess who number 1 is?
Well, what's interesting about the ranking, though, was the ranking was done. So we had to kind of page through this, because the ranking was done not based on the highest to live, but the number 1 ranking was based on what the year-over-year population increase was. So, which is kind of interesting. So
that's
Phoenix, Phoenix
It's
came in
interesting,
number
yes, because it's like it's kind of an odd ranking system.
It is a very odd ranking.
Yeah. So Phoenix came in number 1 because their population went from 1.6, went from the prior year 1.591 million to 1.609 million. So they were up 18,000 residents, I guess, in that city. So that made the number 1, but it wasn't necessarily the highest.
That's right.
To live. So you kind of had to page through the top 50 to figure out which the highest was. But based on that ranking, Phoenix was the one that's attracting the most people, which I suppose has some interest to that piece of data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe a couple pieces to point out there is the household median income, meaning half above, half below, in Phoenix was $72,000. The salary needed to live comfortably in Phoenix is, let's call it, $109,000.
Yep.
And the single family home average value is $440,000. So basically they're saying that at least as it relates to housing costs, you need a salary of $109,000. Average family home is $440,000. So they're basically saying that you can afford a home that is 4 times the salary that you need to live comfortably there.
Well, here's looking at a lot of data and analyzing data a lot. There's already one thing that they've done wrong.
Okay.
They use median household income, but they talk about average home value. So the measure is not consistent across the board.
Right.
Because median is it's going to be at the average or lower. It's never going to be higher. It's always going to be because it's half below, half above. Average is going to, well, let me take that back. The median is going to be a better representation of the data when you have a lot of data, and you have a lot of data with outliers, because the average is skewed by the outliers. For example, if you have a bunch of houses in a neighborhood, one of them's worth $1 million and the rest of them are all worth $100,000. Well, the average is going to be higher because of the $1 million home versus the median is going to be closer to $100,000. So you got to just have consistent measures when looking at data. And I don't know what the median home value is because they don't say it.
Right. Yeah. Very good point.
Yeah. Yeah. So even though these things come up from time to time, it's kind of like, it gets people to click on it. I guess I clicked on it. So that's so objective.
So let's bring this a little bit closer to home for some of the people listening to this. Kansas City, Missouri shows up on the list here at number 16. And it is showing that the
positive population growth, by the way.
Yeah, positive population growth, which, remember, that's what they're ordering this by. Yeah. But that wasn't the thing we were pointing out in our specific episode, but it's still relevant. I see it here, Steve. Here, before you say Kansas City, I'm going to say the highest. So with the highest was San Jose, California, with $265,000 salary needed to live comfortably, which means that your housing costs or your needs were exactly half of that, right? Because that's the 50. That's the rule Matt mentioned. So 265. Now you can mention what Kansas City is.
Okay. So Kansas City's salary needed to live comfortably is $79,000. And the single family home average value is $244,000. So pretty
Not
low.
Bad. Yeah.
Pretty low relative to a lot of the other cities on here. And the household median income, now this is interesting. So again, half above, half below, is $65,000. And then the salary needed to live comfortably, as I mentioned, is $79,000. So not a huge difference between the median income and the salary that you need to live comfortably. So that would indicate that Kansas City, Missouri is, by comparison, a pretty good place to live if you want to, live comfortably. There's probably a lot of people that are living reasonably comfortably because there's not a huge gap between the median income and the salary needed to live comfortably there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
San Diego, 207,000. Seattle, 179,000. New York, 179,000.
Yeah. New York was 50, by the way. So it had the most it had a loss of population.
Yeah. So now going
San
back to that,
Diego, you said was very, very expensive. Also a loss of population too.
lost. Yes. Philadelphia, if Memphis lost people, though, like you said, the very last one, the one that people are leaving the most was New York City. It was number 50 on this list. Los Angeles also losing folks. Chicago losing folks. San Francisco losing folks. DC, San Jose. Now I'm working backwards up the list.
Yeah.
Right. So
Now,
interesting.
It is the other thing with data, especially, good data, accurate data. It does take time to actually have it accurate because things are compile it all and adjust it. This is from 2021 to 2022. And this has been reversing probably over the course of 2023 and 2024, but there was a lot of work from home opportunities that may not exist today. Mm-hmm. And those very expensive cities they're not as attractive when you could go work anywhere or live anywhere and work remotely. So that could be playing a factor into it too.
Oh, for sure.
Where the data now, if we were to look at it now, could be changing.
It's also interesting as you look at these cities that had the big population declines year over year. Look at the average home value in those cities. Yeah. So New York City, number 50, lost 113,000 people. Mm-hmm. Average home value, 789,000.
Yeah.
Number 49 on the list, Los Angeles. Average home value, 1,025,000. Chicago, bit of an outlier here. They're at number 48. They lost population. Single family average home price, 313, so relatively low. Then San Francisco at number 47. They lost almost 15,000 population. Average home value, 1.4 million. Washington, D.C., number 6, 720,000. San Jose, California, number 45, 1.5 million. The point simply being that the areas with the highest home value, generally speaking here, are ones that are losing population. Now, you can't say that that's the only reason why those cities are losing population, but certainly I'm imagining that's definitely going to be one factor, that it's just not affordable to live in some of those places.
That's right.
Right. Wichita, Kansas has made the list. Yeah, it's interesting because we're talking about the top 50 largest states, and it just crossed my mind. Wichita, Kansas made the top 50 cities, I should say, in the country. Interesting. Population about 400,000 folks. Salary needed to live comfortably, 73,000. Tulsa, Oklahoma, about the same size as Wichita, 74,000. Omaha, Steve, where you were originally from, about 500,000 people. A little bit more expensive at 85,000 there. So, it gives us some perspective. I don't know what our listeners will do with this information, but, a lot of times it's just to educate ourselves and kind of understand what's out there and compare where we live to what others are doing and, go from there.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about it for listeners is if you are thinking about relocating in retirement, it would be interesting to take a look at an article like this just to see what the cost of living is and housing prices are and that sort of thing. So to some extent that might influence where people choose to live. Although I think a lot of times people are going to move where the kids and the grandkids are, regardless of what the cost of living might be.
That's right.
But one of the folks I think we just saw in Austin was that exact thing. They had moved to, actually both.
I was just there. We saw a couple and they were both from Kansas City originally, and both moved where their kids went.
Both the clients we saw in Austin, we made a little round robin trip down through Texas, and we saw 2 in Austin, and great folks, wonderful folks. But they both had moved due to kids and grandkids being there, and they both had grandbaby duties. Sorry, babysitting. Well, grandbaby, grandbaby, babysitting duties as well.
Yeah,
which they thoroughly enjoyed mostly.
Yep. Yeah, well, in Austin, Texas, look at that list. That's number 3 in terms of population increase.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Salary needed to live comfortably there, $125,000. So not cheap. And then single family average home value, $565,000. What is that? More than roughly double Kansas City, Missouri. So
that's right.
Definitely a more expensive place to live. So, which is probably a great segue into the main topic today, which is one of these articles that we were sent about a potentially misleading headline. So, Matt, why don't you dig into that for us?
Yeah, client sent us this article that, essentially the headline, and this is what got their attention. Studies reveal 45% of Americans retiring at 65 will run out of money. This is what the headline says.
45% retired at 65 that retire at 65 will run out of money. Now, I guess they know how to get clicks and people looking at that article.
Yeah, like, okay, they will run out of money. Okay. Well, what does that mean, run out of money? So we, of course, read the article, and there's a lot of things to comment on this. And really, when you think about the concerns that people have, they tell us about, well, yes, they want to make sure they live comfortably, enjoy retirement. They're not a burden to their kids or family because they don't have the resources to take care of themselves. I mean, those are the things that they're worried about. Running out of money is, of course, it's part of that, but it's just not affording the things that they need to just even take care of their basic necessities. Because
that's right.
And think about
this in context,
running out of money. We know people have, a majority of folks, they have Social Security. Well, that comes in every single month. So it doesn't run out. It just doesn't maybe go as far as you'd like it to go. But a lot of people just live on Social Security. May not be able to live in California or New York City like we just discussed, but you can live comfortably in some cities.
Oh, yeah. And we've discussed on prior episodes many times throughout our almost 10 years of doing this now that, some number close to 50% of Americans, unfortunately, have little to no retirement savings. So under this study, I guess it would just mean that, we already know almost half the folks, unfortunately, haven't been able to save really hardly anything and are on Social Security alone. But I thought another interesting concept to this article the client sent us, the article they sent us was actually commenting on another article. So
yes.
it took the results they took the body of another article and then used that to then write this headline and comment on it, which I thought it was just a little bit inciting, if you will. And one of the things that I thought was funny about it, well, not funny, but it was just a interesting statement. It said this particular person, the associate director, highlights that those without any retirement savings are most at risk.
So
interesting.
So they're not as prepared for retirement as those? Yeah.
That's really profound. So the ones that are possibly going to run out of money are the ones that don't have any.
Well, I guess you can't run. I mean, you were not going to run out, right? If you don't have any to begin with.
But interesting topic, though, for us to talk about today, because, I love the way you opened it up there, Matt. But people say they do think about losing their dignity in their later years, being reliant on kids, being displaced from their homes. And it can be, your mind can really run a lot of different directions thinking about what that might be like to be older toward the end of life and to not have any resources anymore. Again, not to take fancy vacations even, or buy fancy cars or what have you, but to just exist, to live with dignity. So thought that would be a good thing to talk about today. With how do we, I've been at this 32 years, going on 33. Matt's been at it 22 years. Steve, you've been in this industry, you're CFP for, I think, longer than me, right? 35 years, maybe more, maybe actually more, I think, because we were just talking about that before we hit the episode. You wear it well, sir, but you've probably been in the business over 40 years, right?
No. So 1993.
Okay, well, we both got into the business basically the same time frame.
Yeah. I had a career prior to this one.
Oh, yeah, you were a cat man.
A cat man, that's right.
Steve was a cat man. Linda's talked to Chris and I about what would have happened if Steve would have kept on being a cat man. Can you explain what that is, Steve? Caterpillar,
yes.
right?
Yeah. So my first job coming out of college, worked for, I think what was Caterpillar Tractor Company, technically, I think at the time, and then they changed their name to Caterpillar Inc. because they were doing more than just tractors. But I had a great few years at CAT, my first few years, and so good company. It was sort of tough times back in the early to mid 1980s for the company, but they have definitely done well since then.
Oh, yeah. Well, so with all of our tenures in the industry, and maybe certainly our experience would select against the average because we're working with folks who are actively saving, they're actively planning, they're actively seeking guidance and counsel. They've lived within their means. They have resources to actually plan with. And the majority of the people that we see that we work with, or as in nearly all, unless they want to, don't run out of money in their lifetime. In fact, most of the people, as we've shared on the show, have more money at the end of their life than they've ever had in their life.
Yeah.
It's not everybody, but most do. So why does that happen, I guess, would be the question. And how do those folks what decisions are they making?
Sure.
What's the levers? What are the things that you do? What are the things you avoid to make sure you're not one of those potential 45% as this?
Well, here's what, I mean, kind of back, on the article a little bit about the model that they used, because they had to model, a simulation. They said they looked at different characteristics like healthcare costs, longevity, and use that to determine the sufficiency of people's retirement income. And they said that the model predicts that 45% of American households will run short of money in retirement. So that a model isn't assuming any changes. So there's number one. I mean, this is, so few ways to look at this. It's okay. You're entering into retirement. A lot of times we sit down with folks 5 years, 10 years prior to retirement. And, it's about just getting things in place prior to, and even that modeling that we do then is, well, this is what you're on track to be able to spend, based on some of our scenarios. And then, of course, updating that plan on a regular basis. Like this model in this article is just one of the, I mean, we'll sit down with clients every single year for 30 years. That's one of 30. This is just one. And there are scenarios where when we sit down with clients, or prior to them retiring, where it's like, hey, if this is really what you want to do, that's going to be a stretch.
Right. If you're spending X, you could crank the spending up on these models until they don't
work.
It
doesn't work. Yeah.
That's right. Now, the model does say, this article, actually, the actual article that was being quoted by the prior article I mentioned, it says the model predicts about 45% of American households will run short of money in retirement. It actually doesn't say run out, but that's a nuance here. But running short is probably slightly different than running out. But to your point, Matt, and I always like to say this to folks, and exactly like to your point, it's, we had to do this thought experiment, and I said, you're in a car and you're traveling 60 miles an hour and you have 4.2 miles until you drive off the 1,000-foot cliff. How long until you fall to your peril, to your death? And the people start to calculate what it could be. And the answer is, you don't. You stop. You put the brakes on. You turn slightly to the left or right. You follow the road.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these models have this one assumption that runs it out and says you go over the cliff and it's over with. And that's the power of ongoing financial planning. And really, in my kind of radical example of driving off a cliff, really it was a 10-degree movement to follow the road so that you don't drive off the cliff. It wasn't a 180 or something.
Use your flight planning as an example. I mean, it's off course the entire time, but if as soon as it got off course, you didn't do anything about it. If you're trying to go from Kansas City to New York, you'll fly to Canada if it's off course. I mean, if you don't change it,
right, and
you're not going to end up where you want.
Farther you go, the less 1 or 2 degrees makes a difference, right? So that's why pulling the plan back together every 6 months or so, at least at a minimum once a year, is so important. It's so important. So
things come up and we model that in too. Like, hey, this can work for a short period of time, and let's just review it 6 months later, because they might have an extra expense or they want to do something different. And it's like, we're just there to help people understand what the potential risks are. It doesn't mean those risks will materialize. There's a lot of times the market ends up performing much better than we're projecting, because we don't want to put plans in place and we're modeling out very high rates of return, because then your plan is dependent upon that happening.
That's right. Now, you know what? It's fun that we're getting into this right now because as professionals, we've seen literally thousands and thousands of financial plans. And again, in my time in the business and Matt's time working in this industry, we've not only have we seen these plans created, we've seen each client, if you will, and our own, we call them case facts. That's kind of like the institutional term, like, you know, the truth about where you stand is what I would call it. But the academics call it case facts about a client's situation. It's all the facts about someone's situation, both numerical and emotional and all the things that go into someone's situation. We think about those things. We've seen how the plans have actually worked. So I have the, you know, good fortune of being able to have been doing this over 3 decades and getting to see what did we plan for, and then what happened, and then what did we plan for, and then what happened. That's powerful information. And then a lot of our clients also have that, because especially the ones that have been with us for many years, 10, 15, 20 years, we're able to go back and look at what did the plan say?
Yep.
And then what happened? And actually, there's great wisdom in I call it wisdom from the journey if you're paying attention. And sometimes you're not. You have to go back and just pull the stuff up and look at where were you.
Yeah.
And even well before they even engage with us, you go back and look at where you started. Go look at what you. Well, most of our clients started with 0, so that's a good. It's easy to figure that out.
Yeah.
Like, well, I graduated from college this year, so I had 0. That's where I started. And it's almost hard to believe in one lifetime that folks get to where they get. And like, we don't work with rock stars, movie stars, nothing against that, or, you know, people that have come into like huge amounts of money that didn't have to, in most cases, work for it over long periods of time by living within their means, delaying gratification, those types of things. So a lot of those people have, quote, wisdom from the journey even before they met us, which actually makes them really good clients and better to work with, doesn't it?
Yeah, and those plans too, when you look at them about what happened over that 10-year period or 15-year period, the other interesting thing is how much the goals have changed. I mean, it's one thing to just say, well, we spent the same, we did the same thing every year, we just maybe adjusted it for inflation. It's like, well, that's not even remotely close, because it's a couple years in. Guess what? The kids moved to Austin, Texas, and that's where my grandkids are, and we're moving to Austin, Texas. Like, that wasn't in the original plan.
That was not in the original plan, Steve. We had $7,000 a month they needed to spend, and that's what we modeled till they pass in their early 90s, and then they move to Austin, and the house is going to cost twice as much. So boom, we have to up what they need. No, that's what the planning process is for. We're not going to tell them no. We will tell them no if it doesn't work. We will say
what they can afford and what those options are.
But again, it never doesn't work like by next Tuesday or whatever. There's always a way to look at it, to think it through, to not just say no and be the no people. It's let's look at the options. Let's think it through. And what we're talking about today is, and we're doing it without actually talking about the details of the formulas, if you will, but there's levers. We've talked about levers. I think we even talked about levers, Steve, like on one of our very first podcasts 10 years ago, when we talked about what is a financial plan. I think that was one of the first 5 we did. What is a financial plan 220 some episodes ago? But it's the levers. What are the levers? Well, we just got done talking about spending is a huge lever. If you think about that variable in your financial plan, spending is a variable. What you need to live on is a variable. Matt's already mentioned returns. So how are you allocated in your portfolio? What's the return? What's the assumed return on your assets that are invested? And that's, you know, before you retire and then post retirement. You know, what's another input? Matt, your number
when you
of
claim
size.
Social Security is a lever.
Of course, when you claim Social Security,
our estimate for healthcare costs, it's like, well, again, you know, they're estimates because we don't know what the future holds. So we can change those things. Your inflation adjustment every year. I mean, those are all things, which is not unreasonable to say, well, your rate of income grows slower than potentially the cost of living. I mean, we don't start off that way, but it's just, we know from experience that people don't call us up and say, well, CPI was 5.8% last year. I need 5.8% more money.
Yeah. So I remember when we started the show 10 years ago, and we hadn't gone through a lot of inflation at that point. Like we had been in pretty low inflationary environment, but then here we've come through this massive inflationary environment here in the last few years, where it almost like things just kind of level set.
Oh,
where,
yeah.
boom, everything ticked up 20%. And now it's kind of, the inflation rate isn't as high going forward, but it's not like the prices went back down to where they were.
Yeah.
They're all still up. They're just going up slower now again. But no, you're right. We've never had clients call up and say, every year, give me my 3% increase. That's never happened. We would go
over
10
time
years,
more, but not
in
every single, not compounding at the same rate.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Another fact, a case fact that's important, it's not necessarily a lever unless you're still in the savings mode, is how much money how much money did you save? Like, what do you have
and
invested?
When do you retire?
Yeah, because once you're retired, that fact is kind of, it is what it is. Somebody comes to us in their 20s and 30s and 40s, you can say, hey, no, this is a lever. You can save more. But if you're retired or you're not working anymore, okay, that lever is kind of gone. Now the lever on the other side of it that opposes that would be the spending, okay?
That's
not
right.
how much is going in, but how much is going out. Another lever is your age, that you think you're going to pass away. How long does this money need to last?
Yeah.
That's a huge lever. If it only needs to last 5 years, you can sure spend a lot more
I know.
of it.
I haven't come across anyone that knows their date of death, though, so we can't seem to back into anything on that one.
Well, from time to time, very true. From time to time, we have somebody that will say, to make the plan work, assume we die 10 years sooner.
I won't care at that age. And I'm like, okay.
No, there's that.
We'll introduce you to a bunch of people that are 75 they care how much.
Yeah, we're 82 or whatever. Like, so it's very difficult for us, Steve, to like reduce the date of death.
That's
in a plan to 82 from 92, unless there's a real meaningful reason, and
there's a diagnosis or things that's reality,
just to make the plan work. See, so a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, I'm sort of reminded from that quote from Ernest Hemingway that he wrote in The Sun Also Rises. The question was, how do you go bankrupt? 2 ways: gradually, then suddenly. And I think how that relates to what we're talking about here is, you're not going to run out of money gradually in retirement, just as you guys have been described. It's like, this is a dynamic financial planning process. We're going to review this. We've got different levers that we can pull. So you really should never run out of money in retirement if you are working with a financial professional, because they're going to monitor this. They're going to help you figure out, what do we need to do if for some reason things are not going the direction that you want them to. So there are ways to avoid that. And if you're working with a good financial professional, they're going to make sure that you don't suddenly wake up and realize, I just ran out of money, despite what the headline of this article might say.
That's right. I was in a meeting recently with someone who, there's situations where folks are taking out, they're withdrawing more from their asset than is sustainable over the long term. And part of our job is to make sure that those folks, and we do this very respectfully, but they have us to tell them the truth about things, that, listen, what you're doing, it looks like it's likely that you may deplete your capital base in the next 7 to 10 years. We don't know exactly, but 7 to 10, 8 to 10 years, something like that, like at this rate. And of course, when folks are spending down at those levels where they're depleting their asset, then part of our professional obligation is to make sure those assets are less invested in equities even. So then the returns, because there's not time for folks to go through the typical downturns and come back. So now we have to invest in more fixed income, which does almost make the kind of the end more predictable.
That's right.
But as long as someone knows what they're doing, this particular couple has had a pension and two really nice Social Securities. They had income of close to $90,000 a year with those 3 things. And they were choosing to support their kids in a way that was going to deplete their asset within about 9 years, 8 to 9 years. And they were completely fine with it. Completely fine with it. And they said, when it's gone, it's gone. And we'll have our $90,000, and the Social Security, actually all of it went up by inflation. So their Social Securities and their pension goes up by inflation. It was inflation adjusted, and they didn't have a lot in debt themselves, really. So they said, no, we're fine. Yeah. This is what we're choosing to do. We're choosing to spend this money helping our kids out. And when it's gone, it's gone. And so that's fine with us. I mean, it's all fine with us. We just want folks to understand and be aware of reality and make informed decisions about their situation. I guess, Matt.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I think you made such a good point there, Bill, in terms of your role is not to tell people what to do
or judge people,
but it's like we want to paint a clear picture of reality. We don't want you to live in denial. We want you to understand what reality is, and based on a clear picture of reality, you then make a decision. Like this couple that you just described, they said, we're okay depleting our savings and just living off of our $90,000 or $100,000 of Social Security and our pension income. That's reality. That's their choice. And they willingly made that decision. But your role is to point out the facts of the situation, what trajectory they're on, and then people make that decision. And so that they don't have this go bankrupt gradually, then suddenly thing. They've got a clear picture of reality that you're helping them understand, and then they make the decision based on that. So I think that's a great role that you play there.
That's right. And a lot of folks, like I said, most folks we work with, the conversation is, have you thought of anything additional you could be spending some of these resources on? Again, no judgment either there on that side of it, but a lot of people are accumulating more money than they've ever had in their life at the end of their life, and there's aspects to that as well. And it's interesting because you get folks out in those ages, 70s, late 60s, 70s, early 80s, and their asset is still accumulating, and they're not even touching. They're not even coming close to living on any of the interest that it will, or growth that it accumulates, or even a fraction of that. It's just continuing to snowball. But they still have this fear in their mind that, well, I might end up in some sort of a retirement situation where I need 24/7 care. But they have, in these some of the cases I'm speaking of, millions of dollars that even if they did that, it doesn't even touch, really, in some cases, the interest that they're making and the growth they're making annually. But they still have that kind of fear over it. So I don't know. It's on. We come at it from all sides, don't we, Matt? Helping people know what's possible, and then with their values and their intentions, doing what they choose to do with their resources and their families and their spouses or loved ones.
Yeah, I think the key thing to think about with this is just understanding that, one, these plans are unique and they're individualized. We started off talking about cost of living in these different cities and a study that's looking at a group of people. And that's not specific to your situation. And, that's why it's important. And we talk about the planning process so much. We sit down with clients one-on-one, at least, we request it. We want to sit down at least once a year. Sometimes those get pushed past 12 months because of just timing and things that are going on, but that's our objective. And if it's a married couple, sit down with both of them, go over everything and understand where are they at and what's changed. As we mentioned, over the course of meeting with clients, 10, 15 years, some of these clients we've been talking about, how much their plan has changed and their goals and objectives, because life happens, reality happens. We have to update the plan. And that is why plans don't just not work. I mean, when you don't plan, that you're failing to plan, right? Planning to fail to plan. What's that quote? But the reality is, yes, if you're not planning, you definitely will run out of it. It's just how it works. What's going to happen. So, find someone, whether it's us or someone else that you can sit down with and actually go through this process. We find a lot of value in that.
Excellent. Matt, thanks for the great summary there. And Bill, for your comments here as well. So I think a great way to wrap up today's conversation. If you would like to get all the details about this episode and all the additional ones, you can simply go to keenwealthadvisors.com. You can get the show notes for this episode as well as all the blog posts that we have out there. We have some tremendous educational information. Please make sure that you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done that. And you can do that simply by hitting the subscribe button there on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you tell all your friends and colleagues about the show as well, because we certainly want more folks to listen to this on a regular basis, as financial literacy and financial education is one of the key things here at Keen Wealth Advisors. So again, thank you, Bill and Matt. Thank you to each of you listening here today. We appreciate that. And we'll catch you on the next episode of Keen on Retirement.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
The Steve Sandusky Advisor Network and Belay Advisor are not affiliated with Keen Wealth Advisors. Opinions expressed by Steve are his own and not necessarily the opinions of Keen Wealth Advisors. Keen Wealth Advisors is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Keen Wealth Advisors and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. The contents of this podcast are intended for the residents of the United States of America. No advice may be rendered by Keen Wealth Advisors unless a client service agreement is in place. This program is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as advice on or a recommendation of any particular investment, strategy, or as tax or legal advice for your specific situation. Keen Wealth Advisors is not a tax or legal advisor. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your licensed professional prior to investing. Information in this program was compiled from sources believed to be reliable. Due to the constant state of data changing, we do not guarantee the timeliness or the accuracy of the information provided. Our views or opinions at the time you are listening to the podcast may be different than they were when the podcast was recorded. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. Any prices that are referenced or market forecasts are as of the date stated and are not necessarily our opinions moving forward. As always, please remember, investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. This podcast is not allowed to be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced without permission from Keen Wealth Advisors.